And good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the WyoNation Roundup. I am your host, Chad Smith, and I am joined tonight by first Mr. Brad Reed. Good evening, Brad.
Howdy, boys. How are we? It's been a long winter.
It has been. And then down on the bottom there is Mr. Bryan Stevens. Good evening, Bryan.
Howdy, howdy.
So, all right. So, we are here, of course, to talk about some basketball because for the first time in a long time, probably ever, we have major basketball news in May, boys and girls, with one Jeff Linder heading out. So let's start there with this Jeff Linder news that was broke. Basically, a week ago today, Pete Thamel on Twitter dropping his tweet at 6 p.m. saying that Jeff Linder was in discussions with Texas Tech to become their top of assistant. I will throw this to Bryan first. On a scale of 1 to 10, how shocked were you when you saw that tweet?
Not super shocked. I'd give it like a 6. Like, it was surprising because we hadn't heard anything about it. We hadn't really heard he was looking, but the way he carried himself throughout the year and kind of the things he was saying in his press conferences, it really made it sound like, it was kind of wearing on him. Like, the NIL stuff was wearing on him. I think, players having more power than he was used to was wearing on him. And I think he was just ready to be an assistant again. Now, granted, he's probably getting a pay raise going to Texas Tech, and he's a hell of a coach, but I think he was ready to just not be the guy in charge anymore.
Sure. Some good points there. Brad, your thoughts? I heard you nodding your head.
You didn't hear anything. Yeah, I think I looked it up the other day, and I think like the Texas Tech assistant coach gets like $400,000, and I think he was making $800 as a head coach at Wyoming. So
yeah,
I don't know if he get a pay raise out of it, but
I think actually Alex Taylor, I think that's his name, right? The reporter out of Cheyenne had the contract. I think it was 3 years, $1.7 million is what he signed to be Texas Tech's lead assistant. You could check that. You could check his feed, but I do believe those were the numbers that they came up with. So a very highly paid assistant coach for sure.
Yeah. Can buy a very big house in Lubbock, Texas for that.
So, let's just talk about this. So Linder will finish his stint as Wyoming's head coach with a 63-59 record. He went 14-11 in his first year, which was a rebuilding year, obviously. The second year, that's when things really clicked. Wyoming had one of their greatest seasons in a very long time, 25-9, NCAA tournament, star players galore everywhere. And then everybody thought we hit the lottery when we brought in 3 Pac-12, 3 and 4 star players to come in to the party. And that season fell apart, mainly because Ike, we knew he was hurt, and then they kept not saying anything until boom. I think it was like literally the day before the first exhibition game. They're like, yeah, he's out for like months. And that team went 9-22. So I guess just your thoughts on what we saw on the basketball court with Jeff Linder.
I'll let you take it over, Ryan. You probably saw a lot more.
So let's talk about Ike first. So Ike was genuinely hurt.
Oh, sure. Yes.
We know that. I have heard that Ike could have come back mid-season, but that, to me, that's the only guy that has left our program under Linder that went to get an NIL deal. Graham Ike probably made more than Jeff Linder when he went to Gonzaga, and good for him. I'm bummed that he's not playing in the brown and gold anymore. But, it was good to see Gonzaga have success. Still slightly bitter about it, but that's okay. I think it showed a flaw in Linder's coaching where he had to have it be hero ball for it to work for him. If you look at his first year feeding Hunter Maldonado and just getting him the ball as often as possible. And then the next year it was Maldonado and Ike, and then Maldonado was gone. And his whole plan was feed Graham Ike, and his entire season was built around that. And when he got hurt, I just don't think he had enough in him to change midstream.
Sure.
Yeah, and EK was outstanding for Gonzaga last year. Like he would have been very valuable to have for the Cowboys last year, but he did some really good things in Spokane too.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned in the opening, Bryan, that you haven't heard. We didn't hear anything about him looking around, but so I was digging around Twitter when all this news broke, right, just to see what I could find, and I wish I would have wrote it down because I couldn't find it, but there are several of these really niche Twitter sites that actually have huge followings that all they do is follow coaching changes in college basketball. I'm talking all levels, like going down to non-scholarship, NAIA, up to Division I. And a guy did have a tweet from a couple months ago, and he said, "Hey, Jeff Linder's looking for any assistant job he can get, or even an NBA assistant job. He wants out of Wyoming." And so that guy had good knowledge. Whoever he got it from, it happened. But what rubs me the wrong way is he's been spending all this time recruiting people, including just the day before he left. He signed a transfer from Portland. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I understand, right? This is a business now, but I don't see how you could be out recruiting for Wyoming one day. You signed the player. He signed. They announce it, and then the very next day you're leaving. I mean, I understand that's modern college basketball, and we'll get to all of that in the summer. But, yeah, your thoughts on, I guess, how it all ended.
You got to do what you got to do, man. I can't really fault him too much. If it's not working, it's not working, and that's fine. The guy was doing his job up until the time he left. I don't think we can fault him for that. But again, when you listen to everything that he was saying throughout the year and kind of his demeanor, like I don't know if you guys went to any Cowboy Joe Club events during the last year or so. It was if it was in his contract to be there, he was there, but he wasn't talking to people. He wasn't shaking hands. He was there.
Yeah. Like, I heard that.
It just seemed like it wasn't his gig anymore. And honestly, I really think that his dad's passing had a lot, like really wore on him a lot more than all of us thought.
That's a good point. I forgot about that. He actually missed several games, if I remember right.
Yep.
Yeah. Including the tournament game, which Sundance Wicks coached.
Sure. Brad, you have any thoughts?
Conference tournament, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understood you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Bryan here. I think his dad's passing. You could definitely tell there was something different about the team then, but basketball is still a business, but it's a really crappy business. Like, just having to, be in a guy's home one day and then the next in the back of your head, like you're at this point, you're probably a week into talking to Texas Tech. Like, so, this wasn't just like a spur of the moment thing. Like he was still out recruiting, but he was also talking to these guys in Texas. So it's very bizarre, I guess, but I don't know. Hopefully the guy we signed sticks around. It sounds like we're probably going to need him. So,
yeah. A couple things we'll before we wrap this up. Yeah. So Bryan, you mentioned his demeanor. I've heard a lot of people say the same thing, that he was very cold. Didn't really talk with the fans, didn't engage. But what did it for me, I guess, in hindsight, right, was where he lost the plot is when he was attacking the fans for attendance and lack of NIL. And like, dude, you're like, look at the product on the floor. The state of Wyoming will support a winner. They'll support a losing team too, but they just got to feel that you care. And I think the fan base as a whole never really warmed up to him, especially after the first transfer exit. And I know, Bryan, you got some data collected on that, but once you start attacking the fans, I don't think there's any path back from that. And I'll also say that Berman's done this too, which I think is a big mistake for your athletic director to be attacking the fan base. So, yeah, just your thoughts on that.
Well,
Brad, go first.
I don't really think I'd put Berman in the same boat as Linder on that. I think that Berman was echoing, we need people to donate to NIL. We need people to show up. We really need people there. But his was more of a come support the team. It wasn't a why aren't you supporting the team like a Jeff Linder. And, Larry Shiatt's teams were a really good example of that. Because when Shiatt first got here, like they weren't good right away. But people came out to watch. Like, it was fun basketball. It was entertaining. The players were participating. Shiatt was very thankful to be there. He was out there, walking through dorms. He was going to pep rallies. Like, the dude was in it. And that's the difference between, having a losing team with fans showing up and having a losing team where no one cares.
Yeah, the tone that Linder took with the fan base, that's usually like the beginning stage of your exit, right? Like, you don't see a lot of coaches come back from that scenario where it's the fans' fault, you're not here. Okay, but these things go hand in hand. You need to be winning basketball games too, or football games is football coaches tend to do this thing too. So that's usually step one to your exit out the door. And I can't imagine that he didn't see the writing on the wall where he was going to be put in a situation where it was win this year and you're gone. At least this way he leaves on his own terms. So
100%.
And the last time I can remember someone blaming the fans was Dave Christensen.
Oh, snap.
Sure. That also happened.
And also a person that was not very endearing to people.
Right. But, you can be not endearing to people all you want if you're winning games.
Yeah, his name's Nick Saban.
You're right. But you can't be an ass and be a loser at the same time. Like, it doesn't work.
Yes.
Not usually. All right. So before we turn the page here and start looking forward, let's just welcome everybody to the stream here. If you are watching on Twitter and you want to interact, you want to ask questions, we're here to interact with people, right? You can send your questions on Twitter. We'll take a look at the feed. But if you go to the WyoNation YouTube page, there'll be a live chat box. So go to youtube.com/WyoNation, and you can participate in the chat. You'll be able to bring it up. I'll be able to see your chats here. Good questions. We'll put them up on the screen, and we'll have a conversation here to get your thoughts about what has happened in these past week in this crazy Wyoming basketball news. So I guess the next thing is when this whole thing went down, I knew that, right, you're in May, you really can't have a national coaching search. And I thought there was basically two people who this job was going to go to. One was promote Ken DeWeese to be your head guy for a year and see what happens. Or it was the Sundance Wicks, right, was there. The people kept mentioning his buyout, which we eventually found out was about $700K. But I didn't think that'd be a problem. So I guess when this job came open, for both of you, just your thoughts on what did you think was possible for Wyoming to go and grab?
So I'm right there. Go ahead, Brad.
I was going to say, I was almost 100% certain that they were going to hit the easy button and just promote Ken DeWeese. Like, in the back of my head, I kind of thought that maybe Sonny would be an option, but I didn't know if he would be like the guy that would just bail on Green Bay after a year, really late, really like they're probably out of school by now. Like at this time and be like, yeah, I'm going back to Wyoming. I didn't know if he would do that or not. But I definitely thought they were going to hit the easy button. And yeah, because like you said, you can't do a national search right now. You're not going to find the kind of candidate that you really need if you're in this position. So yeah. I thought it would be DeWeese.
And I'm right there with you. I had, like a lot of people, I had hoped it would be Wicks because, I mean, when Wicks was here, he was a popular guy. Like, the dude bleeds brown and gold, and he wants to be in Laramie. But I'm with Brad. I didn't know if he would be willing to leave Green Bay, and I'm sure that was a hell of a hard decision for him.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, if your dream job is to be the head coach of Wyoming and you get the opportunity, that's a tough call. And even if this had happened in March and we had time for a national search, this is still a good hire. You know, you hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, you know, we didn't do a national search and we just took who we could get. Like, even just taking who you can get, this is a great hire. This guy wants to be here. He is a great fit for the university, and let's hope he can win some games.
Yeah. Nice job there, mid-sentence, getting the cat in line.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
But humanely, right? We don't want anybody from PETA. He didn't hit the cat. He just reminded the cat who was boss and said, no, I'm my train of thought here is lost too. Yeah, I think had to be a hard decision for Wicks there. But this is one of my main points. This is probably, I've never seen this. Maybe in European soccer, I've seen this where things are absolutely nuts. But have you ever seen a coaching search to where the new coach was announced before the old coach was actually announced as leaving? In a very odd turn of things.
That was wild. And I can almost guarantee you it was contractual negotiations on Linder's side.
100%.
Like,
it was
they're trying to negotiate that buyout, and I can almost bet you that buyout negotiation matched exactly what they had to pay for Wicks's buyout. Like that's where it ended up.
I bet you're right. Yeah. So Wicks's, as I mentioned before, was about $700K and that was right from his contract. Now Linder's contract, it wasn't quite as clear. I did do the research. It looks like at this point in time, it was sometime where between 1 and 1.5 million to get him out of his Wyoming contract. So I bet you're right, Bryan. I bet it ended up being a wash financially for both schools. Wyoming paid $700K to get Wicks. They got that $700K back in compensation for Linder. Everybody's happy.
Yeah, it all works out in the end just fine.
Yeah, and I've heard that Texas Tech has a pretty big war chest for their NIL and basketball. It's like somewhere around like $10 million. So I don't think coming up with the money to get the coach they want, I don't think would have been an issue. So hopefully we didn't let them off the hook.
All right, just looking at my notes here. So, yeah, I don't have the press.
I'm sure Green Bay turned around and used that to give Doug Gottlieb a bigger contract. So good for them.
Sure. Yeah, it's all imaginary money exchanging hands across the board there.
Just moving zeros between columns in an Excel spreadsheet, that's all.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, Sundance Wicks does get the call. The news broke late Saturday night. Not late, maybe mid-Saturday night here. Local Green Bay press was reported that Wicks was in deep talks, right?
Which was the least surprising news of all time.
Sure. But some people I talked to were like, well, that can't mean. I'm like, no. When people report that people are in talks, it means it's basically done. And especially in this case for Wicks, right? Like, what does Berman need? Berman doesn't need to interview Sundance Wicks. They don't need to ask him, do you want the job? Of course he wants the job. So as soon as there was any talk, and the Green Bay press reported that Sundance Wicks, in his current contract, he had to alert Green Bay in advance if he was in negotiations with any other school per his contract. And he did that, and that's what got him tipped off. So once he said, I'm talking to Wyoming, I knew it was done. It was a slam dunk. They're not going to reject him at that point in time because it would be too awkward for him to go back to Green Bay at that point with the news being out. So Sundance Wicks gets named officially. I was surprised. I think it was Sunday, right? They did do it Sunday afternoon.
No, it was Saturday night.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. Yeah, he was announced Saturday night.
Yeah, Pete Thamel had a tweet on May 12th.
Okay.
So
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Official Sunday then.
Yeah, I think it was Sunday morning. And then Wyoming had a press release, I think, was it Sunday afternoon, where it was announced officially. You could look up the dates, but that was the timeline that I saw. And I was surprised it moved that fast, honestly.
Yeah, they didn't waste much time, which is probably good because school is probably either done or very, very close to done in Laramie. So I imagine getting into town as soon as possible and talking to the guys while they're still in town, I bet was probably pretty high on their list of things to do.
He did, right? And as you know, if you follow the great work of the social comms at Wyoming Athletics, they picked him up in the private jet yesterday. He is in Laramie. He did some shoots today. And if you haven't seen it, go check it out. He did some posing with some juice.
Bring your own
juice.
Say they got Nick Reynolds in on the juice too.
Correct. Yes.
Since,
and so that's the other
Nick
news.
Reynolds is following.
We have that was made official, and that was rumored that he was coming from Green Bay. So Wicks hired him last year, first time as a full-on assistant in a D1 school for Nick Reynolds, brother of Noah Reynolds. So it's funny how it's all tied in together. But what I wanted to say about that was it was reported today by Ryan Thorburn, who is now working for the university, that the press conference is not going to be until May 30th. And I think that's probably to give him time to recruit and get a staff together, because that's more important than talking to the media at this point. So if you're looking for a Sundance Wicks press conference, Ryan Thorburn said May 30th is when it will happen. And
I was just looking at the Cowboy Basketball social media, and their photo shoot today with Sundance and all of his juice that's quite a tweet. That's quite a photo shoot. I'll say that.
It is.
And I mean, it just shows the kind of guy he is too. Like, that's just the energy that this dude brings. He is almost completely opposite of what Jeff Linder is.
Yep. And I was about to just say and I think that's what this program needed, right? Often when you're in a doldrum, right, you do the 180 of what you had before. And Wyoming has definitely done that here. A coach with energy, a coach he's going to go to those events. He's going to talk to students. He's going to talk to donors. He's going to be Wyoming's #1 ambassador.
Yeah,
for all sports. I think you'll see him out there talking for football, for everything. This guy is the Energizer Bunny.
And I think having young assistants by his side too, like DeWeese and Reynolds, I think will be beneficial for the program in the long term too. Just either, getting up experience of Sundance, ever moves on to greener pastures, or, just having relatable guys, going into these houses and just recruiting these players. So I think he's got some good guys around him too so far. I don't think we've seen all the staff announcements yet or how many changes there will be, but
we'll see.
No, right now all we know is that McCabe is staying in Green Bay. Reynolds is coming with Wicks. I am relatively sure that Nick Whitmore is sticking around.
So interesting. Looking at the Cowboy Basketball roster, Wicks is listed on there. Whitmore is listed on there. Reynolds is listed on there, as is Sean Vandiver and Tim O'Flanagan. I don't see Ken DeWeese on the official basketball roster.
Okay. He was there a couple days ago, so they must have removed him. So interesting.
Yeah, so maybe
he might be looking for other opportunities. And, I can't say I blame him.
Yeah.
He was Linder's guy. So not a surprise. We'll see how that staff works out. Yeah, I think Whitmore will stick around, and I think Vandiver has a pretty good shot at sticking around.
Yeah.
Say, Sean Vandiver likes Laramie, man. He's been here through this is his third or fourth staff that he's been on. The dude likes it here. He wants to coach basketball, and he wants to do it in Laramie, and we're glad to have him.
Sure, yeah, 100%. So we'll see there. Before we talk about some other stuff, I wanted to talk about Wicks and his, I guess, X's and O's. And so this is another way where he is different from Linder. So obviously he coached under Linder. So he has a similar philosophy. Now, when I was looking at the stats between Wyoming and Green Bay, they're pretty similar. But one thing, and I couldn't really nail this down because the metrics are all over the place, but in terms of pace of play, I think we're going to play at a much faster tempo than we did under Linder.
So I don't think you can put too much into that. because if you look at usage patterns for Green Bay last year, Noah Reynolds was the team.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like that dude played like 38 minutes a game. It was insane. He was basically what Hunter Maldonado was for us the last 2 years he was here.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, he's going to try to push it, but you're also going to see the same defensive philosophy of, make the bad players beat you in ways that they don't normally beat you. Like you're going to leave a guy like a Graham Ike open at the 3-point line because that's not his game. He wants to be inside. You're not going to let Ryan Ritus Petratus get the ball if you're playing Air Force. You're not going to let Xavier Dussel get the ball if you're playing Nevada. Like you're going to make these guys take shots that they don't want to take, or you're going to leave a guy like, Oleg Koyanets wide open at the 3-point line and dare him to beat you. Is he going to make a few? Absolutely. But he's not going to make enough to win you the game.
Sure. And that's the article that I read about Green Bay and their X's and O's this season, is where he really kind of tailored his game plan to each game to focusing on what do the other teams do poorly and then attacking that weakness. And I think that's a little bit different than Linder. I think Linder had a system, but I don't think he deviated for much from it. I think he is more of a plug and play, like do your job, be where you're supposed to be. I think now we're going to get a little more tweaking. Instead of just running our system offensively and defensively, you're going to see some changes to attack the other team's weakness, which is more of a pragmatic type of thing, but in a similar way.
I think there was some of that with Linder. I do think you're right. He's more of a system guy. The guy is he loves European basketball. Loves it.
Yeah.
Eats, sleeps, and breathes Euroball, and that's great. Attacking the weaknesses is something that Wicks picked up from Linder under his 3 years as an assistant there. Mm-hmm. And, that's why he was a good fit as a head coach. He picked up some really good coaching tips from Linder, who, let's not get away from the fact that Jeff Linder's a hell of a basketball coach.
Sure,
that dude can coach, man. He's really, really good. He just was in a bad spot. So I do agree with you that we're going to see more run and gun coming. I know that I heard Cody talking about how Doug Gottlieb had reached out to him about our job too. And the first thing he said was the first thing that literally every coach says is, why aren't you running people out of the gym if you're at 7,200 feet? And obviously you need the personnel to do that, but I do think that's probably the goal.
It's been one of life's great mysteries across football and basketball is, why aren't we running these people off the court or the gym or field or whatever?
Well, you can't do it unless you got 10 deep. You guys remember 20 years ago when we were in school and you had those Steve McLean's teams where you could have 2 full lineups and just do a full lineup change, and there's you swap out Josh Davis for Mark Bailey and there's no decrease. You swap out Jay Straight for David Rottinghouse and there's no decrease. Those guys were running and gunning and it was a hell of a lot of fun, but you can't do that unless you've got 10 guys that you can rely on.
It's a name I haven't thought about in forever, is David Rottinghouse.
Right? Dude was fun to watch though.
He was a blast to watch.
Oh, okay. I forgot. I had this written down on the bottom. So here's a little trivia. Let's see if either of you can get this.
This is
now, so we are in the 23/24 academic year. And Wyoming has now replaced, unexpectedly, both the head football coach and the head basketball coach in that same academic year. When was the last time Wyoming had to replace both coaches in the same year from the same school year for their big 2 teams, the football team and the men's basketball team? Run that through your head and we'll see. Because I haven't seen this reported. So today I went to if you're familiar with Baseball Reference, you can go to Sports Reference.
That's cheating, Bryan. I see you using Google.
Yeah.
Well, fine. I'm just looking up a list of basketball coaches so I can kind of pin.
Yeah, no, it's hard to line it up.
Does it date back to Joby Wright?
That was my first guess.
I'm not going to answer that question because that's a leading question.
I know, that's why I asked it.
if you want to make that your guess, you can. But Brian's looking it up as well. So
how about Joby Wright and was it probably would have been?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm going with too. That would have been Tiller.
Tiller, I think.
You guys are both wrong, but very close.
I thought I would be wrong.
All right. So yeah, I thought that was close. I think Joby Wright was hired in like 93, and then Tiller came in 90 or 91. So close, but it's right after that. Well, not right after, a couple coaches after that. So the last time Wyoming had to replace football coaches in the same academic year and a basketball coach started in December of 96 when Dana Dimmel was named the head football coach after the departure of Vic Koenig. No, not Vic Koenig. Who was that? Jeez. That was Tiller, right?
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah, Dimmel was after Tiller.
Yep. So Dimmel hired in December of 96, and then Larry Shyatt, for the first time, came in March of 97. So that was the 96-97 school year is the last time Wyoming had to replace both coaches. And they did it with, I guess, mixed results.
Those were both pretty decent hires.
They were, sure, I agree. But, I mean, Shyatt stuck around for a year, of course, as we all know, and left. And then Dimmel had success until he ran out of players that were good and couldn't recruit anymore. But he was a good coach at the time.
So that first Shyatt team was when I really started getting into basketball in Laramie. Staying up until freaking 2 o'clock in the morning watching a Big Monday game on ESPN.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I miss Big Monday.
When Chad and I were in the band, I did not like Big Monday at all. I had a chem lab on Tuesdays at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Those of us that weren't nerds in college, we stuck it out and went to chem lab the next day just fine.
All right.
Nerds.
So, yeah. So, according to my research, that should be correct. But I was surprised that nobody in the media has mentioned it, right? Because it doesn't happen very often where you have to replace both coaches.
Those are two kind of major coaching hires, too, because Dimmel did some good things. He was another guy that wasn't super popular with the fan base by any means.
No. Yeah.
Larry Shyatt definitely was. So it's kind of an interesting way to look at it. And Dimmel was pretty good, and then we went to Vic Koenig, who was not.
Hell of a defensive coordinator, though.
It still is.
Still.
All right. So let's talk more about Sundance Wicks. I know, Brian, you had some interesting thoughts about past history and how you think that could help lead to building a more solid program in the future here.
Yeah. So if you look back at last season, Sundance Wicks was announced to be one of the finalists for the Green Bay job on March 14th. Cody at 7220 Sports posted, it was 1:30 in the morning, that Sonny was one of the 5 finalists for the head coaching job. Then you get to looking at the transfer portal last year when we had the mass exodus. It didn't start until March 14th. That's when Xavier Dussel entered. That's when Jeremiah Oden entered. That's when Nate Barnhart entered. Like, all these players started jumping ship, and those guys weren't signing for NIL money. Like, you got Dussel went to Fresno. Oden went to DePaul. Noah Reynolds went to Green Bay, where Sundance Wicks went. Now, Noah did sign with Wisconsin first, but apparently he never heard back from him, so he just followed Wicks, who had recruited him to Wyoming. It's the same thing that happened with Cam and Kale from this year's class. They followed Bryson Williams over to Drake. It was a big loss for us, but that's the assistant that recruited him. Stick with who you know, I guess.
Yeah, that's how these things work in basketball. It's very important. And that's why when Brad mentions, I think Wicks is going to have a fairly young staff. We'll see what happens. We'll see who sticks around. We know Whitmore is a good recruiter. Wicks loves Reynolds. Thinks he's a rising star. So that's why he was the first hire. And so he must see what he can do on the recruiting trail as well. So
at the same time, Green Bay had a lot of guys bounce off their roster. Like, I would not be surprised to see a David Douglas come to Laramie. I wouldn't be surprised to see Amari Judkins come to Laramie. Like, these are two guys that, Douglas was the freshman of the year in the Horizon League. Is the Horizon League the Mountain West? No. But it's still a D1 league. The dude can still ball. Like, those would be some good guys to have on the team.
Third leading scorer for Green Bay last year, David Douglas.
Correct. Yeah, so it'll be really interesting to see. I know they've had those portal entries. I know a guy today who signed with Green Bay out of high school announced that he was being released from his deal. So that's another one to monitor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Sundance Wicks could get him to come in. Now he's more of an upper Midwest guy. I think he's a JUCO actually. So we'll see. He's a guard. I think we're pretty guard heavy right now.
Well, we were before Linder took off. So right now we're sitting. We lost Falbert and Pagonis off of the freshmen that were coming in, and they were two pretty highly regarded Canadian players. Yes. Now, again, with Linder being a Euroball guy, doesn't surprise me. But Falbert in particular was a hell of a get, and it'd be good to see him come back down. So right now we're sitting at, I'm looking at our current list. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guards, and 1, 2, 3, 4 forwards.
Okay.
As we're sitting right now, that's including the freshmen that are coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that. And that's why, as I mentioned before, press conference not until May 30th. We have a staff to fill, and obviously he's got to recruit like there's no tomorrow. Now, the good news is there's 1,000 players still in the transfer portal. Think about that. 1,000. There's got to be 3 or 4 guys who can play at the Mountain West level, right? And it's about identifying talent. And maybe they're not there now, but it's about projecting into the future. And Bryan, I know you have a story about that, which I also read today that people may not remember, about Sundance Wicks and his ability to look at players that people don't.
Right. Yeah, Sundance Wicks was the only guy in E1 to offer Noah Reynolds. Like, again, Cody, who does a hell of a job reporting on all this stuff, he reported that when Noah Reynolds came to Wyoming, it was Wicks saying, bring this kid in. You can fire me if he doesn't work. But Wicks was the guy that identified Noah Reynolds in the first place, who has turned into, like, it's not going to surprise me if he just kicks ass and takes names at TCU next year. That kid's a hell of a player. But that's Sundance Wicks bringing people in that, maybe other people are overlooking. I'm sure Nick Reynolds is probably in the same boat. Like, you think I can almost guarantee he's got eyes on all the high school programs around where he grew up in the upper Midwest there. Like, those guys are going to do well in Laramie, and they're going to be overlooked by a lot of those schools up there because there are brighter stars on the team.
Sure. And I didn't know this about Nick Reynolds, but he actually spent a year running ops for DU. Mm-hmm. So he has recruited and worked in the Front Range before. So he might have some Colorado contacts. Be good to keep that open, right? Because we know Colorado actually puts out quite a bit of talent, as we know. Some of Wyoming's best players of all time have come from Colorado.
And none of them have come here since Linder's been here.
That's true.
Like, Graham Ike is the only recruit he got from Colorado.
True. And I guess we did get the kid who also transferred out, who was the son of the guy who played for the Nuggets. Can't remember his name.
Oh, right.
Bowen? That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, he got guys, but none of them stuck around. Obviously, Maldonado was from Colorado, a huge get. But Linder didn't recruit him.
Yeah. I mean, he re-recruited him. I'll give him credit for keeping Hunter around.
I think Wyoming really needs to keep that pipeline to Denver open for sure, for long-term success. So we'll see what happens there. But I think in this new age,
look at when Chiat came back last time. He looked at who the all-star team in Colorado was and saw that Riley Grabo was the only guy without an offer, so he made Grabo an offer. And all he did was come in and like lead the nation free throw percentage and was tops in the Mountain West in assists every freaking year.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't ask for a better point guard.
Yeah. And that's what we need right now, right? We don't need superstars. We just need functional players. And I think you're going to I think you'll see a huge churn in things, perhaps quickly if you get the right players in, because, right, the way he's going to coach Wicks, who wouldn't run through a brick wall for that guy? To whereas for the past couple of years with Linder, obviously the players have been very upset and they weren't willing to play defense, right? The biggest thing was our defense was non-existent. And Linder kept saying defense, defense, defense. But if your coach is nagging on you all day and you don't believe he has your back, you're not going to play defense.
Well, and that's the number one indicator of how your team is feeling too. Like, because playing defense is the hardest thing to do. Like, you have to have your energy up. You have to be dialed in. You have to really believe that what you're doing makes a difference. And if your coach isn't instilling that in you, of course your defense is going to suffer.
Mm-hmm. So I think Sundance Wicks is exactly what we need. We need, for the players to be motivated. And, right, anybody who's seen this guy speak knows, as I said, you'll run through a brick wall for this guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to get the fans fired up. He's going to get the players fired up. He's going to solve a lot of our problems. Now, I don't know if he can coach a lick, right? We have 1 year of pretty good results to see, but that's where, right, a staff comes in, and we'll see how he does long term, where he has to maintain a program. But I think I would put my money on Sundance Wicks being a better than average coach for sure.
So what's our metric for success this year? Because let's be honest, we're building from scratch at this point. Like, of those players I named, 2 of them are walk-ons that we have.
Yeah.
So, like, the cupboard's kind of bare right now. Now, who he brings in for transfers is, like, that's going to make or break. But what's our metric for success? Is it that attendance is up? Is it, is it a number of games that we're winning? Because, like, as much as I think this is a great hire, it's so late in the year that I think hitting 20 wins is a big ask.
No, that's not.
20
wins is not reasonable.
Like 500? Are we going to be okay with 500? Because that's basically where we were this year, and everybody was pissed.
I think 15 wins would be, with the roster we currently have. We know this roster is not complete, but with the roster we currently have, 15 wins, I feel like, would probably be a win at this point, considering we're hiring a coach in the middle of May. We have a roster that is whatever it is. We haven't, obviously, we're not going to see a schedule for, a couple months yet, but 15 wins, that's 500-ish.
Yeah, I don't know. No, it's interesting. Like, Bryan, he brings up an excellent point. I think we were 15 and 17 this year. I thought we did pretty dang good considering the mood around the program and the roster overhaul.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem is, right, we saw that a lot of people left, and you can tell it's just the way it happened, to where obviously Linder, his heart wasn't into it.
Well, and there were a lot of, like, really questionable decisions too. Like, why in the hell wasn't Cam Manyow starting this year? Why?
Yeah, a good question, yes.
Mason Walters is great, but why isn't Cam Manyow in there? Like, Wetzel was doing awesome, but you find a way to get your best players on the floor. Why wasn't Manyow playing during the tournament? Why was Cale Combs sitting on the bench? Like, if you're building for the future, build for the future. Like, it's no wonder these guys leave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at that point, you're not really trying to salvage a season by any means. So,
yeah, we'll have to see what the schedule looks like. And that'll be another interesting thing, too, is to see the connections that Wicks has, because people may not know this, but basically it's the basketball staff that builds your college basketball non-conference schedule.
Yep.
The AD doesn't really have, I mean, he might chime in here and there, but it's relationships between coaches that get stuff done. And I think if you want people in the seats, I think we need to get back to regionalizing our schedule. We do a fairly decent job, right? We play DU every year, but we need to get Montana State, Idaho State, Utah Valley, Weber State. Get them on the schedule. Get teams from our region on the schedule. And I think,
and get D1 teams on the schedule too.
Yes.
We don't need to be playing the damn Colorado School of Mines.
No,
Like,
yeah. You don't learn anything from that.
What about
good for the Hard
Metropolitan
Rockers for
State?
coming up, but we shouldn't be playing regular season games against exhibition level opponents.
Yeah, and that was yeah. Oh, now I should mention right now that Linder's gone. Northern Colorado is another team. Get them on the schedule. There's no reason you can't be playing a team that's less than 2 hours from your campus every year. Do it. Needs to happen.
There's
and that's one of the. I think that's one of the weird things that Linder had going on. Like, he didn't want to play his buddies.
No,
he didn't want to play Steve Smiley because that's the school he just left. And we've seen it with other coaches too.
Sure.
I'm not just going to throw Jeff Linder under the bus, but I mean, everybody's friends with everybody. You can't just kind of avoid playing the guys that you're like, listen, Brad, I know that you're coaching at my old school and that we're going to curb stomp you, but I'll still pay you to come up and play a home game with us because you're a D1 school.
Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see the schedule. And then once we know, right, the staff, the players, the schedule, then we can go. But I think just to play competitive basketball, I think has got to be your first step in year one with another complete rebuild.
Screw competitive basketball. Play entertaining basketball.
Yeah, sure. And that too.
Too, though.
They will. Yeah, 100%. I think it will be entertaining brand of basketball.
Like, find another Derek Cook that's just a freak athlete that's going to fly around and, like, the guy's never going to make a three, but he's going to swat shots and dunk, and hell yeah, that's fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're thinking about putting together your out-of-conference schedule, are you kind of like looking for like lower tier, like this year specifically, I guess? Are you looking for like lower tier Big Sky, lower tier? Geez, what other conferences are near us anymore? The WAC, I think. Like,
sure,
like WAC teams.
The WAC's pretty much gone at this point. I don't know if you've been following that, but they've got like 3 teams left.
Yeah, I guess West Coast Conference now, right? Like Grand Canyon. We played Grand Canyon the past couple of years. Yeah, there's sure another team we should be playing on
University
a regular
of
basis.
Portland.
Yeah, why not? New Mexico State, sure. I mean,
yeah, we don't have to go that far either. Like you were saying, get Northern Colorado on there. Get South Dakota State. South Dakota State will probably kick our asses.
Yeah,
those are the teams that we need to have on the schedule.
Sure. Yeah, both Montana schools. It's a crime that we don't play them. I think. I know Brad would like some visits up there from Wyoming.
Say the last time the Cowboys came up and played the Grizz, I think I used my press pass that night, so I sat in courtside for it.
Yeah, just for selfish reasons. He wants to be able to get a press pass.
Yeah, I think that was Josh Adams' senior year. I think it was the last time they came up here. So that was still Alan Edwards.
So yeah, Sundance Wicks, the new head coach, and it's going to be, I think, just great to see. One of Wyoming's own, to see how he builds this program, how he gets the fans going, and we'll wait. I know there's going to be tons of news before his press conference, and I think it'll be one of the best press conferences you see, because by then he may have most of his roster filled out and his staff. So it should be
a wild press conference.
It's going to be pretty good.
So I was looking at this. I remembered this tweet that you had retweeted a few weeks ago, Chad, and it was the Division I men's basketball portal entries by conference. And this has obviously changed since then.
Sure, yeah.
In the Mountain West, it's 65 players in the portal. The American Conference had the most at 126. So, yeah, with that many players out there, and probably not even half of those probably have new schools, like, it's time to, there's plenty of opportunity out there to go find some players that have been D1 basketball players that.
Yeah, there's 1,000 players in the portal.
Yeah.
That's insane. I can't even comprehend that. And this shows the downside of the portal is there's 1,000 kids out there, but there ain't 1,000 scholarships available.
Nope.
So
that's for sure.
I've been keeping track of the players leaving the Mountain West too. And most of the players that have left the Mountain West are doing pretty good, except for Tim Miles' squad in San Jose. There are a lot of guys that took off from San Jose State that still haven't found landing spots. And there's some good ones. Tibet Gorner, like, he'd look pretty good in brown and gold.
Yeah.
Great Osobor left Utah State and went to Washington with Danny Sprinkle, and I heard he got like a $2 million NIL deal.
And that's before all his other endorsements too. Like $2 million is a conservative estimate, which is insane.
Yeah, it was funny because, he was just kind of coming off the bench at Montana State like 2-3 years ago, and now he's pulling a $2 million NIL deal from the Huskies.
Yeah, so I will keep pounding the Twitter searches to see what I could find. It's hard to find stuff out there, but we'll see if we can get any nuggets on where Wyoming is going. There's a couple transfer portal sites that track offers. So I think once he gets his staff here, I think we'll start seeing some offers this week, perhaps, and we'll get an idea of what type of player and what positions they're after. And I'm sure he's not sleeping much, because he's just got to be looking at film, right? Looking at all these players in the portal saying, hey, who can play at the Division I level in the Mountain West?
I'm not sure that guy sleeps at all. Like, let's be honest here.
He sleeps when he needs to. It's probably not often, but it's when he needs to.
Well, he's been in worse positions, if you know. So I guess I never read the full story, and maybe I should have, but I mean, there was a time where he was running that basketball training facility in Phoenix.
Yeah,
he was
out of an MMA gym that he's like slept in the back of.
He was like sleeping on like a beanbag, like in the back room of this MMA place when he was homeless. I mean, it's just wild. So it's just such a crazy story. You could make a movie about this guy.
Hope he wins some games first, though.
Yeah, that's true. So, all right. I think we've hit pretty much everything we can hit. Do we have anything we think we missed that you'd like to mention? Any final thoughts?
Well, a couple thoughts from me. One, thanks for naming this episode "Brining the Juice."
Yeah, I missed nice the G there. we'll get that fixed. That's editable.
And I know this is a basketball episode, but College Football 25 gets announced tomorrow. So I've never hit pre-order so fast in my life. I don't think I've pre-ordered a game in 10 years.
We'll be talking about that. Yep. It's 100 days until week 0, I do believe. Today is.
There used to be a few of us that had a franchise going.
I can already feel you guys peer pressuring me again.
Yeah, you should shell out for a PlayStation.
Man, I have my PS4 here that I haven't touched in probably 2 years. And the only time, like, I have a Switch, and the only time I play my Switch is when I fly somewhere for work. Like, that's the only time it gets touched.
Any other final thoughts on the basketball front, Mr. Brad?
No. I hope this hire works out. I feel like the Tom Fornelli tweet all the time, where it's just like, I have no idea how this hire is going to work out.
Yeah, nobody does.
Yeah, but I hope it does. I think he's the right guy for the job. It's the guy that we kind of suspected to be back here at some point. So I hope it goes well.
Say absolute worst case scenario. This is a guy that everybody's going to root for the entire time he's here. Think of like Joe Glenn on the football side. To this day, everybody loves the guy. Even though he couldn't win, people still filled the stands because he was a genuinely good dude, and he played a brand of football that we could be happy to watch. I'm looking for the same thing from Wicks. He's a good dude. Play the game of basketball the way that, is going to entertain people and is going to, win you some games. And I think he's going to have quite a bit of leash for these first couple of years. So let's get a good foundation built, and let's see what he can do.
Sounds good. So we will be back after his press conference for sure. We might have another show in between then. Brad and I have been planning our summer. We're going to try to get this more regularly going. We have some ideas. We're going to try to get some guests. We're going to talk a bunch of different topics in these long doldrums now that we're in the off season, and hopefully we don't have any crazy major news between now and the kickoff of fall camp for Wyoming football.
Yeah, luckily the football transfer portal is closed for the time being. So
Chad, what are you going to do if you're not able to do your Craig Bold metrics articles all summer long this year?
I know. There's a lot of things we can talk about now instead of me beating the deadest horse of all time.
It didn't even start with Bull though. Like I think your first one was like Steve Stannard, I think.
Well, it was after the defense. Yes. I will take full credit for getting him fired.
Not at all for performance.
Yes. So we're going to be working on some guests. We'll be talking football, basketball, maybe some wrestling even if we can get some things to roll our way. So yeah, a whole lot of Wyoming content coming your way throughout this summer with great people like Bryan. So Bryan, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here. Anytime you guys want me, I'm back.
And so, yeah. So for Brad and Bryan, I am Chad Smith saying thank you for tuning in to the WyoNation Roundup. We will catch you next time.